Hi everyone, I found another hidden treasure among the M-ATX motherboard series, and it's worth mentioning about this board coming from MSI known as the B850M HTI Max Wi-Fi. Before I dig into it, I'd like to thank MSI to have provided this board for me to share with everyone. Starting off with the unboxing. These are the things that you will get: a quick installation guide, a European Union regulatory notice, and of course a leaflet of nice stickers that you can use. Besides this, it does give you a proprietary cable connector, which this cable is known as the Easy Con connector, whereby one end connects to the motherboard and the other end is split into more connectors that provides the 3-pin 5V ARGB, a additional USB connector, and a 4-pin PWM fan connector. It also provides you with a SATA connector, only one cable, which is right angle. And on top of which, these are provided, which is the M.2 screws. This is meant for holding the M.2 at the back of the motherboard, which you can see over here. An additional M.2 clip. There are a total of 2, and this can be found with one over here. Okay, this is how it looks like. And of course, the removal tool, as in like to remove off the clip and to relocate the location depending the length of your M.2. Last but not least, of the accessory is the antenna, which is in white, and this base here is magnetic. See, it holds in place. Strong magnet, nicely done. The construction of this board is very sturdy, as it's made of 8-layer PCB with 2R copper traces, and the design is pretty slick. And if you're into wide build, please consider this board, as I will talk more about it on why you should put this in your list. Now back to where the design is. As mentioned to you, this is a white piece of board, but it's not totally white. As you can see, these are gray cream color with the silver linings and a touch of chrome. And on the rear IO itself, you have this dragon crest, and this is where the ARGB effect will take place. Only this area. Now besides this, right, as mentioned to you, it's all white. It does have a brother board, but the brother board, which is the X870E HTI, is not as nice as this. Let me just show you. This is the brother board, which is the X870E HTI. As you can see, right, the DIMM slot here are all black, the clip are in black, and the PCIE slot in black, and the 8-pin EPS, including on the 24-pin, these are all in black, including the digital debug LED. Else for this board, fantastic, all are in white, as you can see, inclusive of the 8-pin EPS and the digital debug LED. And this is the only M-ATX board that has a debug LED, or should I say the digital debug LED. Nice touch. Now, as for the dimension of this board, it's 244 by 244 mm. The height of the VRM at the rear and the side, measuring from the bottom to here, is at 35 mm. And as for the rear, from the bottom to here is at 45 mm. The cooling solution of this board is fantastic. In fact, you will be witnessing the thermal benchmark on how much it can cool the VRM, the M.2, and the chipset. Just to tour and to show you the side VRM, take a look. It's very chunky with all this pin stack, and this will help in greater dissipation of heat. Inclusive at the back, the rear VRM heatsink, this below this, right, okay, this top part is made of plastic, but right at the bottom, the whole chunk is aluminum with pin stack, and again, it does dissipate tons of heat. Not only that, inclusive of the M.2 area, this whole armor shield, which is toolless, you can remove. See, it's pretty chunky, and it does absorb tons of heat from the M.2, inclusive of the chipset area, one whole block. And again, the cooling is fantastic. Probably later on you can witness how much it does at my room temperature, 30 degrees Celsius and such. Now coming to the power pace, this board cater a 14+2+1 with all ATM chokes. As you have witnessed, I've done the review on the Morta, which has 60M choke that is able to tank a high-end processor, which is the 9950X or the 9950X 3D. Else for this, right, with the ATM choke on the power face, it not only can tank, you can even overclock with no sweat. Now at the center over here, this is the 1718 socket where it can cater processor for the 7000 series, 8000 series, and the 9000 series of AMD. Right at the bottom, total of 4 DIMM slot, and it has a max capacity of 256 gig running on dual channel, and it does support both XMP profile and Expo profile, and have a max mega transfer of 8400. Now when I mention 8400 mega transfer, right, it doesn't mean that you populate all the DIMM slot with RAM stick, it will hit the target as in 8400. It depends on luck, so do take note on this. Now as for the PCIe slot, well, this is gamer's paradise. If you only have one PCIe card, which is your graphic card, make use of this board. Based on the fact it only have one PCIe slot that runs on full X16, no lane sharing, and this is Gen 5 backward compatible, and this is controlled by the CPU. And as for the M.2, there are a total of 4 M.2. You have 2 over here which is controlled by the CPU, and these are of Gen 5, and it's all backward compatible. Else for the lowest slot, which is this, the third slot, inclusive of the back, the fourth slot, both of these are Gen 4 and it's controlled by the chipset. And all these are backward compatible. Again, there are no lane sharing, inclusive if you were to populate the two SATA hard disk 2.5 or 3.5 hard disk, there are no lane sharing at all, not even with the graphic card. Well done. For the locking mechanism, starting off with the PCIe slot where you plug your graphic card, just slot it in till you hear a click and that will be in place. To remove off the graphic card, there is this button over here. Take note on the lever. So when I press this, right, this will be unlocked. Okay, this is lock position, this is unlocked. Once it's unlocked, hold your graphic card with both hands and you pull it out. And this is in fact a safety measure of what MSI have provided, so that we as builders, right, will not dent the bottom PCIe pins and such. Now as for the M.2, it's pretty straightforward. To remove the whole metal plate over here, or should I say the M.2 heatsink, press the lever at the back and pull it out. See, it will expose the M.2 slot. And at the top of the M.2 heatsink, you have 3 thermal pads. Else at the bottom right, there's only 2, the first and second slot. And these are meant for dual-sided chip, or should I say the M.2 right have double-sided chip. And to place this back, just align the 2 notch over here to the studs and to clip it back. And that's quite straightforward. It's toolless. To fasten the M.2, the first 2 slots using the same mechanism where you have this lever over here. So what you need to do is just to place your M.2 in, push it down, align it, and to clip it. See, it's clipping inwards. So to remove this, right, just remove all this lever and you just spring up and you can just remove. Else for the third slot, which is here, this is just a click. So you can just insert and click. This will be in place. And to remove all this, press the ball over here to the back and you'll be released. Then you can remove this. Now, except for the rear M.2, which is this you will need to use the screw, which is provided on the accessory package, which I've shown you earlier. Now, something to take note. As I mentioned to you, this is a gamer's paradise where there are no lane sharing and such. So if you populate only one graphic card, and only one Gen 5 M.2, right, I would suggest not to populate this way, as in like having the graphic card at the top and to generate the OS drive and the game drive, right, over here at the top. Reason being, right, since this is Gen 5, it's generating a lot of heat, right? Assuming, okay, this is not a Gen 5 M.2, but assuming. So you have the graphic card and the M.2. So if you to place this back, right, your M.2 position is over here and your graphic card is right at the top. And as you know, the slot, right, will be protruding this way. Okay, this will cause the graphic card to push hot air directly to the M.2 heatsink. And with the accumulation at the top, okay, meaning to say the heat from the top and the heat from the bottom, right, hitting to the top section, right, this might cause thermal throttle on your Gen 5 M.2. I would suggest that leave a gap. Since these two are of Gen 5, and if you're only having one Gen 5 M.2, right, put it at the second slot. Because as mentioned, these two are controlled by the CPU. So it doesn't matter whether you put first slot or second slot. It will still work. It will still function at full speed export. So having a gap here, so take a look right now. Assuming that you have a graphic card that's this thick, the heat is, you know, pushing through here, leaving a gap so that your M.2, the heat is, the accumulation through here. I would say that not to sandwich heat and heat together, that will cause thermal throttle. That's the reason why I'm telling you to do so. Now, another finding which I find is that if you have a OS drive, a game drive, and you wanted a M.2 for storage on games and your photos and such, right, have it on the third slot. And make sure that it's not Gen 5, just Gen 3 or Gen 4 will be more than enough. And especially for storage, if you have one over here, right, if you want to populate at the bottom, yes, you can put Gen 4, but remember, it will generate heat. It doesn't have a heat sink. So in such event, right, check on your case itself. See, does the metal, the cutout on the motherboard, right, see if there's a metal piece that's covering this. If there is, right, you can add a thermal pad that will act as a heat absorption off from the M.2. So this will not throttle. So something to take note. Now, besides this, right, I learned to find out a trick. Assuming you have only one graphic card and you have one M.2, which is single-sided, okay, and you find that, hey, this is troublesome. I got to remove this, I got to remove the top, but I wouldn't want to destroy the bottom because this is single-sided. So what you can do is, you can take this out totally, and on the board itself, right, you have this additional clip. There are additional two more. You can make use of those clips to place over here. See, this is just a function that I discovered. You can do this too. So you don't have to clip your M.2 this way. Okay, instead it's just plug and play. See, it works too. And to release. Now, having said this, right, if you were to place a clip over the second set of the first slot, replacing this, right, you will need to take note that you need cushioning from here, so that you will lift up the M.2, pressing the top NAND that is generating, or the controller that is generating heat, right, to the top thermal pad. If it doesn't touch the top thermal pad, right, then there will be throttling again. So take note on this. So it's something that you can feather on it. For the connection of the motherboard, let me just zoom in and to show you. Now, starting off from this section, the mid section, you have a 4-pin PMM connector. This is very good location, whereby it locates for your rear fan, so that you don't have to route your rear fan cables, right? If this is not here and at the bottom, right, you got to route your rear fan cables all the way to the bottom, which I find is a hassle. This is a very good position. At the side, you have this TPM module. On the bottom left, before I talk about the connection, it does support an onboard audio, making use of the Realtek ALC 4080, and it's of 7.1 channel Dolby surround sound. Nicely done. Now, over here, this is meant for your front I/O audio connection, which is meant for your headphone and microphone jack. Next, you have this 2-pin. This is named as JDB1. This is meant for in external device whereby you do the error codes and such. And followed by next, there are a total of 2 USB 2.0 header, and right at the top, okay, I'm not too sure if you can see. Let me just zoom in further. Okay, right at the top, this is the chassis intrusion, where some of the OEM case, right, like HP, Dell, and such, right, they make use of this. So when you open up the side panel and such, right, there will be a warning signal. But for us, right, we don't use this. Now, this switch, which I will show you later, this is meant for you to turn off the LED on the rear AIO, or should I say the ARGB effect on the rear IO. Now, at this section here, there are tons of connection points, right? Now, this is another pin where you connect to a device to do the debug and such. Followed by this socket over here. This is meant for display purposes, whereby if you connect voltage to this, right, without having the processor or the RAMs, right, you will just glow the ARGB effect on the rear IO. Now, at the bottom here, there are 2 pins over here, which is known as block 1 and block 2. This is meant for overclockers, where you make use of an external clock device to do your overclocking. Nicely done. Then you have a 3.2 front USB connector, which support up to 2 USB type A and have a transfer rate of 5 gig. Then right at the top, you have these 2 pins over here. Starting from the inner pin, this is meant for safe boot. If you do short this and to boot your system, right, to UEFI, right, it will do the default safe settings. Or you can just clear CMOS, which is at the side. This is clear CMOS. Now, having to use the safe pin function and the clear CMOS, right, there's a big difference. If you do short this, right, yes, it will load into UEFI in safe mode of all the configuration. You can reset load profile and such. Else, if you use the clear CMOS, which is at the side over here, this means to say totally wipe out all the configuration that you've done on the motherboard. Next, you have 2 3-pin ARGB connector. Okay, so sorry. Yep. These 2 are the 3-pin ARGB connector for your ARGB on your fans or the power strip. And right in the middle where you have this 4-pin, right, this is meant for your internal speakers. And right at the bottom, this is the front IO connector for your power switch, reset switch, the power LED, and the hard disk LED. Followed by another 4-pin PWM fan header. Okay, moving to the front. Now, this is meant for the easy con connector. It's shown you during the unpacking. So if you click this, right, if you do clip this, right, it will split into more ports. As mentioned, 4-pin PWM fan connector, the additional USB connector, and the 3-pin 5V ARGB. And all these are controllable through the UEFI. Then next you have a 4-pin PWM fan connector, 2 SATA port, which is right angle, followed by a Type-C USB port. Now, this has a mega transfer of, which has a transfer rate of 20 gig per second. Now, a 24-pin connector where you connect your power, 24-pin connector to here, a digital debug LED. This is what I like a lot. Now, besides the function of debug LEDs, right, showing you the error codes and such during the verification at the boot, or should I say at the pre-post, right after when you boot into Windows, right, you will become a thermometer for your CPU. Nice touch. Now over here, there are more connection point. There are more connection point for your ARGB connector, and total of 3 4-pin PWM fan connector. Which at the top, this is meant for CPU fan 1. The second one, this is your pump underscore system 1. Now, if you are making use of liquid AIO, make sure you plug the pump block RPM, right, or should I say the pump block 4-pin PWM connector, right, to this, so that you have full consistent amperage to your pump. And this is system fan 4, okay, which is for your case fan. Followed by this, I wouldn't know what this is. I believe this is used for external device and such. Moving to the top, there's no connection point at the front, else you are given two 8-pin EPS connector. This is the rear I/O. Starting from the left, you have this button here that says clear CMOS, and right at the bottom it says BIOS flashback. In order for you to update the latest BIOS using this BIOS flashback button, you will need to have the latest firmware on a thumb drive, then plug it to this type A port where it says BIOS, or should I say flash BIOS. In fact, this is highlighted in a rectangular gray, so you'll not miss out on. Now, for the instruction on how to do the BIOS flashback, you can check on the instruction manual of this motherboard, or you can refer to the top right hand corner where I will leave a link to a content creator known as Conin. Wow, he did illustrate on how to do a BIOS flashback on MSI board, so you can check that out. Next, you have a HDMI port. This is version 2.1, and it has a projection rate of 8K 60Hz, and this is making use of the integrated graphic on your processor. There are a total of 3 Type-C port at the bottom, where all this has a transfer rate of 10 gig, and these are not display port, okay? These are just USB 3.2 times 2 port, so take note on this. There are a total of 8 USB Type A port, where the blue ones are having a transfer rate of 5 gig, and the red ones are of 10 gig. Right at the top, you have a RJ45 socket, which has a transfer rate of 5 gig. Very strong LAN connection port. I like this. Next, you have this Wi-Fi socket. This supports Wi-Fi 7, which is of a true Wi-Fi 7 that has a 320 MHz bandwidth channel, as compared to the rest of the motherboard that say Wi-Fi 7, right, for the M-ATX series. Next, you have all this. Before I talk about audio, besides the Wi-Fi, it does support Bluetooth version 5.4. And over here, you have the audio port, where you have the line out, which is meant for your speaker, the microphone in, and a SPDF out. This is one of my favorite part to test on the motherboard, which is the network connection. As you can see, this motherboard is catered with the LAN port, having a transfer rate of 5 gig, and a true Wi-Fi 7 adapter, which is making use of the MediaTek MT7927. Now, why do I say it's true Wi-Fi 7? I've tested a lot of boards on AM5, and none of them is catering at a channel bandwidth of 320 MHz. In fact, majority of them is having 160 MHz. And in most MSI board, I do appreciate what they have done. They have always catered with an adapter that has a true channel bandwidth of 320. Now, let's start off with the LAN connection, which is the 5 gig port. Now, before I do so, let me just pull the stats from IDA64. Okay, this is just to show you that I'm making use of this motherboard. Now, starting off with the 5 gig port, this is a local server. So local to local server, right? The ping rate will be very good. Probably I would say 2 to 3 ping. See, and the transfer and the receiving rate, right, is always at 4.7 or 4.6 gig, and sometimes slightly more. Upon the 5 gig, I'm receiving this. This tells me that this port, it's performing as what it should be. And as for the upload, see, it's the same. Now, I'm just going to move over to further away, or should I say, to another country of the service provider. And it also depends on the service provider. Does it provide the 5 gig port? If you select a carrier that is not catering the 5 gig or the 10 gig, right? Take for example, I were to take Netcom. Okay, if I were to run, right, you will not see the figures as in like 4.6 or 4.7 gig, not at all. See, it's lower. This tells me that this server is catering at a 1 gig port. Alright, I'm just going to stop here. I'm just going to select something which is applicable to test on this LAN port. I know that the gigabyte, which is 196 miles, which is at Malaysia, this does provide the 5 gig port. So as I run, right, you will see that the figures will go above 3 gig or maybe 4.5 gig or so. See? So this proven that this port it's doing very well. It does perform as according to specs. Now as for the upload, probably lower, I would say. And this is also due to the fact of the traffic that you upload to Malaysia server. I'm just going to run again. Hopefully that this time the upload will be better. For the download, it's always consistent because from where you are, right, you're fetching the data off from another country. And if you have a very strong carrier, or should I say ISP, right, you will definitely yield this kind of results upon the 5 gig. See, the receiving is this much. And for the upload, see, the second time is slightly better. There is a establishment connection on the channel. So this is how it looks like. The local and overseas, this port does check out very well. I'm just going to disable this and to enable the Wi-Fi. Now as for the Wi-Fi, a true channel of 320 MHz. And what does this do? Now if I were to test local to local, which is Singapore to Singapore, right, it will sustain at the bandwidth of 3.2 gig or so, 3.1 or 3.2 gig. So let me just test this out. You'll be seeing 3.1 to 3.2 gig for download speed. See? Or even better. This is local server. And for the upload, it's identical. Just gotta wait a bit longer as this is Wi-Fi. See? So it does check out very well locally. What about overseas? Now as mentioned to you, for overseas, right, it depends on the carrier whether does it provide those kind of bandwidth. Okay, I'm just going to select this. I know this is going to work. This is one of the service provider at KL, or should I say in Malaysia, that does cater the 5 gig and 10 gig transfer rate. Alright, so let's try on the Wi-Fi. If nothing goes wrong, right, it will go around 3.2 or such. See? So it just tells me that this Wi-Fi adapter is performing too, which with the specs cater, be on the instruction manual or the website. And as for the upload, as mentioned to you, due to the channeling, meaning to say Malaysia is fetching the data off from my end, so this might be slightly lower, but it's not lower than 1.8 or 1.5 or 1.8 gig. I'm going to test it again. This is the upload, and hopefully right now, having to establish the channel, right, the fetching from Malaysia to Singapore data, right, will be much higher as compared to previous, which is around 2 gig. See, it went up almost 3 gig. So with this say, right, it checks out very well on both of the LAN port and the Wi-Fi adapter. Another thing I'd like to emphasize what this board is capable of doing. In fact, if you install a fresh Windows 11, right, the boot up time is fantastic. By far, this is the second M-ATX board that I've tested that boot up that fast. The first was MSI B850M, and this is also another fast boot board. In fact, both of this and the MSI are of the same timing when it comes to boot. Now I'm making use of the GL-iNet IPKVM switch, which allows me to control this motherboard. As you know, this is actually shut down with just a LAN connection. So when I do this, it will trigger and to wake up. Take a look at the motherboard. See, it triggers. So when this trigger, right, it will take no time for it to boot into Windows. And I'll show you the task manager on how fast it boots up. See, it's pretty swifty. And best part that when it boots up, right, it takes about 15 seconds or so, or even lower. I'm just going to go into the task manager and just to show you. See, 12.8 seconds boot up. This is fantastic. Now I'm just going to let it sit for a while, and I'm just going to reboot the system and to show you how fast it is to take to reboot the system. Okay, probably I'll just do some surfing and such. Okay, probably I'll just do this. I'll let it load fully. Alright, now I'm just going to reboot, or should I say restart, and to show you how fast it is. Again, witnessing the boot up time from cold boot is 12.8 seconds. And right now I'm just going to reboot Now, many have argued that, oh, this is a fresh installed Windows. Yeah, that's right. I'm comparing with all the fresh installation on a motherboard. In fact, I always do that because a stand, right, just to show you that how fast that it's able to boot. And based on the fact that most of the motherboard reviews that I've done, right, is mainly on their new, Agisa version, or should I say the updated BIOS. So that's the reason why every time when I do a review, right, I'll make sure to test it with a fresh installed Windows for a couple of weeks and to do the content. Alright, now, having to say this, right, I rebooted the system. Let's witness how fast it goes. I would say it's probably about 14.8 seconds or so. So right now it's booted, and I'm just going to go to the task manager. Okay, looking at the stand. See? Is 12.6 seconds. This is how fast this system boot up. Now to show you the RAM training cycle, as this is the characteristic of AM5 platform, especially when you're migrating from Intel to AM5 or upgrading from either AM3, AM4 to a AM5. Don't expect when you piece up everything right and when you boot it up, it will go straight into UEFI. No. For the characteristic of AM5 platform, it normally does the RAM training cycle whereby you verify your RAMs, capturing the JTAG profile and such. Now on my top left, you will see a black screen. Now this screen is connected to this motherboard, and I will show you how long it takes to boot into UEFI. The moment when I press the button, or should I say the start button, and to click on the stopwatch, as you can see on my top left, there is a stopwatch. So I'll press the start button together with the stopwatch. And once that's done, right, you will see that the digital LED display here will cycle, inclusive of the debug LEDs. So let's see how long it takes. Here we go. When you flash to 15, right, it's perfectly alright as it's verifying. See, the debug LED goes off and it's still verifying. At this moment of time, do not touch it. If you feel that it's taking a long time, right, do not shut down the machine or to clear CMOS, just let it run. And in no time, right, you should be seeing a green LED at the side of the digital screen. See, once it's in green, right, see on my screen, it's booted and it will go into UEFI. See, it takes approximately 36 seconds. Okay. Now, this is only for the very first time. Once it's verified and you have done all your configuration on the BIOS itself, right, be it whether you reset the system or you shut down the system, the next time round when you boot up, it will be much faster. So take note, for the very first time it takes 36 seconds. I'm going to reset the stopwatch. I'm just going to power down. Okay. Refresh the page. Now, this is the after verification. Let's see how long it takes to boot up to UEFI. Here we go. Now, for some reason, this board is very amazing. In fact, it's the second M-ATX board that is booting up very, very fast based on the RAM training cycle. It's lightning fast, I should say. And best part is that this LED, debug LED, right, it's pretty good as a night. You know, it just shows you the indication whether it's cycling through or verifying. Now, as I talk, right, I did stop the stopwatch. It takes about 24 seconds to boot up. So this is how fast the board is. For the ARGB effect on this motherboard, it's only on the rear I/O where you have the dragon crest, and this will beam on the underskirt of the VRM. Nicely done. And of course, you can control this ARGB effect together with your RAMs separately in this application called Mystic Light. You will need to install the MSI control center in order to have that Mystic Light installed and to control the ARGB effect. Now, another beauty about this is that if you do not want this to be turned on, there are two ways to switch it off. One with a physical switch. Let me just zoom in. As you can see over here on my left, there's a switch over here. If I were to switch it off, see, the Dragon Crest ARGB is gone, but not the ARGB on the RAMs. So take note on this. And when you turn this off, right, it does not turn off the debug LED digital light over here. And the second way to do it is to head into, okay, let me just turn this on, head into UEFI, which is on my top left hand corner, on the easy mode, where you have this easy LED control. If you were to do this right and to save it, this will permanently shut it down. See? And in order for you to bring it back right, you will need to go into UEFI to switch it on. Now, to show you another beauty about this board, whereby the digital LED, okay, let me just boot to that. When you're in Windows, right, this postcode digital LED, instead of doing all the verification, right, it becomes a thermometer, whereby it will show the temperature of your processor. Right now, as you can see, it just started. So my idle temperature is 67 degrees Celsius, which is reflecting. Of course, this will drop because right now there are some cycle behind the background. So these are a few things that you can do with the motherboard. For the thermal test, this will be the component I'll be using, exclude the discrete graphic card, as I wanted to stress on the processor, be it the load or the integrated graphic. So I just want to see how much this motherboard can, dissipate heat and such. Now these are the components. I'll be using a Ryzen 9 9950X from AMD. This is the motherboard, and as for the RAMs, a set of King Bang SawBlade 32GB kit, and these are the cache latency with the mega transfer and the voltage, and of course with Expo on. Besides this, I've set the VSOC to 1.15 volt, and for the liquid cooler, I'll be using a old liquid cooler, which is a Arctic Liquid Freezer 2 360, but I've changed out the fans to have 320mm gentle typhoon, and my room temperature is ranging from 30 to 31 degrees Celsius as I conduct this test. And as for the PBO2 limits, well, by right I'm using the default, just want to push it slightly more. So instead of having 200 watt on the PPT, I set it to 230 watt, and for the TDC is 160 and the EDC is 225. And as for the curve optimizer, I've set both CCD, as in like the CCD0 as -15 and CCD1 as -10. And as for the curve shaper, these are the frequency that I've set, and each frequency have 3 temperature, and I've set it equal. So for mid frequency, I've set it to -15, and for high frequency, I've set it to -10, and for max frequency, I set it to -0.5. Now, when I conduct the test, right, in fact, I'm running the Cinebench R23 together with the Firma. And how it's been conducted, I'll run 30 minutes, let it cool down for 5 minutes, and run the last 10 minutes. So for the last 10 minutes, which is the throttle test, it is meant to show you how this board reacts. So it's by a sequence, and having said this, right, letting it to cool down after 5 minutes of the 30 minutes stress test. This is what I get during the I would say the idle temperature, which is 44 degrees Celsius on my CPU. And these are the rest that you probably have to take note. The system, which is the motherboard, the MOSFET, the chipset, the 2 DIMM slot, which is my DDR5, the Gen 5 NVMe. I've already mentioned that I'm using a ByWin X570 Gen 5 M.2. So it does show you the controller temperature and the the NAND chip, which is listed over here. So this is at the start. So as I run, right, okay, probably I'll let it run. Nothing much, nothing significant. It is still hovering around this temperature. So when I push to the last 3 minutes, okay, somewhere around here, yep. So as I run, right, take a look. The CPU temperature is hovering great. The clock speed is always at 5 gig or above, which you can see the peak is at 5.1. This is in fact the average. So it's hovering fine. Looking at the vCore and the rest, the power package, all these are doing fine. And my SoC, as I mentioned to you, I lock it to 1.15 and it go max to 1.158 volt. And amazingly, since it's the last 3 minutes, right, take a look at the temperature on the motherboard, the MOSFET, the chipset, and the rest. they are all hovering pretty well, not even hitting 55 degrees Celsius. Fantastic. So as I run further, so as you can see, right, look at the temperature. 76 degrees Celsius, almost 77 degrees Celsius, okay, for the last few seconds. And when come to the results, see, I'm hitting 43K just by pumping the PPT to slightly, above, which is 230 instead of 200. With this say, right, all this check out very well. The motherboard itself is able to sustain the clock speed, which is, okay, probably I'll just rewind. See, which is 5 gig on average, and at a peak of 5.1 gig. This is fantastic result. There are tons of things I like to talk about this MSI B850M HTI Max Wi-Fi. As I believe you can feel the vibe, that I'm very excited to share with you my experience on this board. First of all, the construction is rock solid. It doesn't flex or such. Next thing is the design. It's very clean. I love how they design the patterns and such, all with lines, with curves and such, and a touch of silver bar, which is the whole, the armor shield on the M.2, the VRM heatsink, the side and the back, inclusive a touch of chrome lining. Nicely done. And best part, I myself do not like ARGB stuff, but this board is something very unique, whereby the ARGB effect is only on the Dragon Crest, and MSI have deliberately done a cut out over here so that the ARGB not only show on the crest, but it just beam on the underskirt of the rear VRM heatsink. A nice touch. So if I were to place this inside a case itself, right, this would definitely stand out, cause I love the underskirt. Well done. It's just like a vehicle. Underneath the vehicle, right, you have some lights. So these are the effect that I appreciate a lot. Now besides this, right, this board has a fantastic power face, which is 14 plus 2 plus 1 ATM choke. Most of MSI M-ATX board is able to run high-end processor. Else for this board, right, not only it can tank, but it can overclock. In fact, I believe this board is meant for overclockers. As why I say this, there are 2 connection point here, which says base clock 1, base clock 2. This is meant for overclockers. In fact, if you have an external clock device to plug to here, you can do fine tuning and to overclock. Now, something I wish I forgot, for those of you who do not like the ARGB effect on the board itself, right, you can choose to either go to UEFI to turn it off permanently, or you can make use of this switch over here. Now, as the system is running, right, you can just click on this switch, not a problem. It will not interfere. Or you can choose to load into Windows, go into MSI Center, making use of the Mystic Light to control the ARGB effect. You can do that too, as in like to turn it off. But I would really appreciate what they have done with the switch over here. Fantastic. Now, besides having to say it's able to overclock and such, right, the most amazing part, okay, I believe this has to go, have to do with the structure of the VRM heatsink and such, how they have actually plotted. You have witnessed I pushed the processor, right, slightly higher. Instead of the PPT 200 watt, I set it to 230. Take a look at the clock speed. It's able to hover at average 5 gig and at a peak speed of 5.1. And not forgetting, it can go to the max boost at 5.7, not a problem. And on top of which, when you look at the Cinebench score, right, it's 43K on an average, able to tank on a high-end processor, right, be it the Mota, which I'm going to show you later, and the M power, right, you can only sustain at a Cinebench score at 41 to 42K. Else for this, right, 43K straight. So it's telling me that this board is more than capable to do overclocking. And best part, the thermal performance on the side VRM, the rear VRM, the M.2 is proven, especially on the PCIe, the M.2, which is making use of the Gen 5. I'm not even going above 51 degrees Celsius. And all this, right, the VRM heatsink is not even hitting 50 degrees Celsius. And amazingly, the chipset is so much cooler as compared to the rest of the MSI M-ATX board that I've tested. So this board is a true overclocking machine, I should say. Beefy, powerful, and best part, if you are into gaming, right, only have one graphic card and two M.2, right, you don't have to consider any M-ATX board. This board will be definitely for you because there are no lane sharing at all. So whatever you plug in, right, it will be on full speed. Okay, this is the bonus of it. The only thing that probably you might not crave a whiteboard. Then, sad to say, they don't have. I wish that MSI have a black version of this. Alright, so that it will cater for, you know, DIY builders, right, to have a black board instead of a white board. So you have two options to choose. Anyway, this is a overall very rock solid board. Now, to my experience on all MSI M-ATX board, right, one thing good about them is that the network connection. The port itself will be at 5 gig for all their MSI board. I mean the MSI M-ATX board, inclusive of the Wi-Fi 7, is a true Wi-Fi 7 that carries a 320 megahertz bandwidth channel. So that is full on. So everything you see here, right, it does check out well. And amazingly, okay, stunning. This is the part which I love most. Based on the fact that it doesn't have the algorithm to calculate the lane sharing and such, right? It bypass that, right? Your boot up time, my goodness, 12.6 seconds, 12.2 seconds, be it cold boot or restart and such. So this is fantastic. Now back to the history, why I love this board so much, based on the fact that I see the improvement of what MSI have done. First of all, I am really impressed with the first board they have reviewed, which is the MSI B850M mortar, because this board is able to tank a high-end processor with 3 M.2 slot. Okay, and with the Wi-Fi as mentioned, the LAN connection is rock solid. So I was actually impressed with this. Then later on, I've gotten this board, which is the B850M Power. Now I've not done a review on this, but I'm going to do it soon. This is even more rock solid. There are more M.2 slots with overclockable RAM slot, which you have two dedicated 2 slot just for RAM, you know, overclocking. Well done. Then when I was approached by MSI saying that, hey, Cleo, can you check this out? I am shocked. I've been testing this board for a couple of weeks. Okay, this is in fact 3 weeks before and such. I've been testing it. I've been, you know, heavy, I should say, abusing this board, but it is still able to hover and to sustain the temperature. Not only this, to, you know, sustain the clock speed and such. It's a very fantastic board. So if you guys are into white theme and a gamer and a overclocker, right, this is the board for you. Now for the MSRP, I know that it's hovering around on, you know, online shops. It's around 260 to 280 USD. So if you ask me, is it worth getting this board? Yes, why not? No lane sharing, performance perfect. You can overclock slightly, and it's very mature. The cooling is fantastic. The design is fantastic. Above all that I mentioned, I missed out one part, which is this debug LED. Okay, I'm stunned with this based on the fact that I've not seen any M-ATX board that have this debug digital LED. And not only it acts as a postcode debug LED, when you boot into Windows, right, this will act as a thermometer for your CPU. In fact, you can configure it to show the temperature of your CPU, your MOSFET, and even your motherboard. Well done. Now with this said, any flaws? Well, there is. I hope that, you know, they might want to port the power button and the reset switch on the board itself, so that this you'll be able to test it outside the case, because it does have the external clock to do overclocking. So a reset switch and a power switch will be, I mean, practical. That's what I feel. But overall, that's only a minor flaw whereby you still can use the front IO to short it to power it up. Now, with this said, I'd like to thank MSI to have provided this board for me to share with everyone. And for those of you who are actually new to my channel, welcome to my channel. If you like my content, do remember to subscribe and to click on the notification bell button. And do me a big favor, help my channel to grow. Just click on the like button if you like this content. Now, do not go away, as at the end, I will be talking about the UEFI interface, be it the easy mode or the advanced mode. Once again, thank you, take care, goodbye. This is how the UEFI interface look like. There are basically two modes. One is the easy mode, the other is the advanced. I'll start off with the easy mode. At the top where you see all this icon over here, starting off with the M flash. Now this is meant for you to update your BIOS on this motherboard using the UEFI interface. I would strongly advise you not to use this based on the fact that some country, right, there might be, out of sudden power surge or the power cut down. So in the event if you make use of the M flash to flash your BIOS and halfway the process it breaks, right, this will break your board. I would strongly advise you to do your BIOS flashback instead of making use of the M flash. Now the BIOS flashback is at the back. For more instruction on this, you can click on my top right hand corner. It will guide you through on how to make use of the physical BIOS flashback button to update your BIOS. Next, you have this hardware monitor. When you click on this, right, this will show you the interface of the fan curve on all the fan headers that you populated your fans to, or should I say plug to. Like for example, right now I'm using my liquid freezer 2 360. So as you can see, right, this is my radiator fan which is running. I can control over here, which is based on the temperature, then toggle the percentage of the fans. So let's say, for example, I'll set this to 80. Take a look at this, see? It will just move. So you can manually configure this, even on temperature. Even on the percentage, right, you can set this, see? It will drop. So it's either you use this manually, okay, let me set it to original, or you can make use of the buttons over here, or should I say the points over here. You can just point at it, drag and drop to where you want it. See, it will just change over here too. So these are the ways that you can do to control the fan curve of your radiator fans, and not only this, to all the rest of the fans like your case fans. As for the pump, right, this is meant for your liquid AIO, the pump block. I wouldn't advise you, if you're using air cooler, right, to plug your air cooler fans to the pump, the pump underscore system fan 1. Reason being, right, by default, this thing does not toggle the smart fan mode. It will run 100%. Meaning say your fans will always be 100%. Unless you want that, then you can just plug. So at all times, right, for air coolers or radiator fans, right, it's best to click on the, plug to the CPU underscore fan 1, so that this smart fan mode, right, is always on and following whatever curve you have set. Now next will be the performance preset. This is meant for you to set PBO enabled or disabled, or should I say auto. Oops. Followed by the profile. Now after you've done all the configuration, you can save it or to load. See, you can save, as you can see here, or load. Next is favorite. Now I'll talk about the favorite, how to do these favorites, and how to add the configuration list that you wanted, like splitting them to favorite, the subfolders like favorite 1, favorite 2, all the way to favorite 5. This lock, if you do any changes, right, see, I've done the changes on the fan curve and such, it will reflect over here just to tell you that what you have configured. Followed by help. This is just all the shortcuts of what you can toggle. Things like the easy mode and advanced mode, right? I normally know that I have to toggle F7 to switch in between. Okay, just to show you. See, for F7, right, if I press once, it will go advanced. If I press again, you're back to easy mode. Next, you have languages. You can select whatever language that you want. take for example, let's say I want Chinese, take a look at the readings. Some of them will be in Chinese. Okay, let's see. I will set this back to English. Next, we have search. What does the search function do, or should I say the magnifying glass you can see over here? So in the event, let's say you know that there is a function that you want to enable, disable, and you know that it's built in this motherboard. Instead of having your cursor to do the selection of the submenu or your mouse, right, you can just come to the search and to do a search on the function. Take for example, as I mentioned, FTP, the TPM itself, you want to set instantly when you search, it will list over here, so you can just set it, enable or disable instantly. So this is the search function. Now as for the camera over here, right, the short key is F12. What it does is make sure that you have a thumb drive connected to your motherboard. So if let's say you want to take a screenshot of this, you can just click on this icon or press F12. That will capture the page. And let's say you want to do other pages like this, right, you can do too. You can just click on here or press F12. It will capture this page, and it's very sharp resolution instead of using your smartphone to capture and to explain things. So this is one of the functions that I always use. Now next thing is the exit, whereby I don't have to mention about this, it's just save and exit. Okay, telling you what are the changes, do you want to save and such, and you just boot into Windows. Now followed by this section, you have this game boost, you have the AI and the memory. Now what it does is this will enhance overall of your system performance. If you want to just push your system just by one click, you can just click here, set it on, and it will always boost. Next will be the MPU, which is meant for AI devices, or should I say that is built on the processor. Now for 7000 and 9000 series, right, they do not have this, so at all times it will be off. It only happens when you have processor like the 8000G and such that has a built-in MPU section, then you can toggle this to make use of the AI function. Next you have the memory. Now as many of you are familiar, you can either set the Expo profile, or your RAMs have the XMP profile, right, you can set to XMP, or you can just leave it as standard. Standard will run on the base clock that is on your RAMs itself. And over at this section over here, you have the information of your motherboard, the BIOS version that you updated. Oh, for your information, most of the time when I do motherboard reviews, right, I will always flash to the latest BIOS, but not beta BIOS. And it also tell you that which version of the BIOS and the date, which is listed over here. And as for system temperature, this is the motherboard temperature. Then over at this section over here, okay, probably I'll do this section over here. Now for the easy mode itself, you can toggle. As I mentioned to you, right, I'll talk to you regarding about the favorites. So if you have things saved on favorites, as in like the subfolders, right, okay, as you can see over here, you can toggle over here, selecting your subfolders. Okay, then on this section, okay, easy configuration, since I don't have the favorites, all the things listed, I will just show you over here. Now starting off with the precision boost overdrive, these are all pre-set settings, like the enhanced mode 1, enhanced mode 2 and such, so we can play with it. You wouldn't want to set the PVO2 manually, the curve optimizer, the curve shaper. If you guys do not know what I'm talking about, that is in-depth other undervolting or overclocking your processor. So these are the preset, but normally these are pushing factors, as in like they will push the system and calculating the cooling on your processor, right, to perform at a higher, I should say a higher performance. So we can select over here. And if you want to limit, as in like the temperature, you wouldn't want to go above certain temperature. You allow it to push, but you want to control the temperature. So these are the thermal points, as in like 65 degrees Celsius, 75 or 85. So when you select this, right, take for example 85 degree, you allow the system to push whatever current that you want the processor to, to sustain a max performance, right. It will just push and push and push. But once it reaches 85 degrees Celsius, as mentioned, if you select this, okay, this one, it will stop there and you cool down first before it continue to push. So this is actually what it meant. Then the rest I don't have to mention. It's just enhance of the boosting and such. Now there are two sections over here which says the PBO base clock boost 1 and boost 2. Now this is for external devices, as I mentioned to you during the connection of the motherboard itself, right? There are these two port which you can connect a external device to set the base clock and such. So if you have done that on the physical device, right, select either boost 1 or boost 2, which most of us will not do that unless you're extreme overclockers. Memory try. Now these are preset to, let's say I know that my RAMs are running on this timing, okay, which is on the Mega Transfer 6000, and in fact it's okay, it's not listed here. Anyway, I know it's running on this 6000 MHz with the transfer rate of 28, 35, 35, 76. If you want to try a tighter timing and such, right, you can feeder over here. See, you can set. Okay, yeah, that's right. And if you want to push the Mega Transfer, you can do that too. So what it does is, let's say you want to select running at this. When the system boot up, right, it will not do the export profile. Instead, you will take the memory try selection. Let's say it's this. You will test it, verify. If it's not able to, boot right, you will just go back to export profile. Okay. So sorry, I should set this to export. All right. But for myself, I personally will not do. This is fun to play with, okay, at a short period of time to see how much the latency and such. But in prolonged period of time, right, I will not use this based on the fact that your RAMs are already on expo, it's already overclocked, and you push it further, right, in long period of usage, right, it might be stable at that period of time, but in long period of time, right, your RAMs might degrade. So I would strongly not to use this. Okay, let me just set it to auto or disable. X3D game mode. Now the X3D game mode and this game boost, right, is totally different. As I mentioned, this is overall pushing your performance of your system. As for X3D game mode, right, this is focusing on processor that has a X3D chipset, okay, which is the 9800X3D or the 9950X3D. So if you toggle this, right, your gameplay will be faster and smoother, things like that. Personally, I've not tried this because I'm not a gamer, but there are there are posts on Reddit stating that if you enable this, right, you might have some shutter screen on the gameplay itself on certain games. So you got to try this out yourself. Next will be the graphic card detection. If you set it to auto, right, it allows the system to detect whether you are using an integrated graphic on the processor or you're using a discrete graphic card, okay, which is your RTX card and such. For this, right, gamers did advise to disable this or put it at ignore if you have a discrete graphic card. But the thing is that if you set to this, right, yeah, the system might run faster and such, but in the event, let's say something happened to the graphic card and you have to boot into UEFI and such to reconfigure certain things. The thing is that once your graphic card, right, couldn't project out, you can't have this UEFI interface. End up you have to clear CMOS. Okay, so this is one of the downside. For me, I'll just set it auto because it's like, I don't play games. Now next is the MSI driver utility installer. Well, this is whereby for brand new system they've set up, they've installed a fresh Windows OS. Once it boot into Windows OS, right, there will be a prompt on the lower right hand corner telling you to install the MSI Center. Now, some of you might not like to install that. You can select when it prompts you whether you want to install the MSI Center and such. For me, I will install based on the fact that I will need the actual drivers for the system, or should I say for the motherboard. So I'll install that. So this is actually what it is. Next, you have the default home page whereby every time when you boot into UEFI, right, you can select what to boot, as in like what to see. If you want advanced, right, okay, instead of showing you the easy mode, it will show you to advanced. Now, if this is at none, right, this system is pretty unique, whereby the last boot from UEFI, let's say you boot, okay, last boot is advanced mode, you're in advanced mode, and when you exit it's always on advanced, right? The next time when you boot into UEFI, you will remember what your last page is, which is on advanced. So this is actually what I meant by, the default page as none. Or you can fix it, as mentioned to you, to set it advanced, overclock, etc. and etc. Now next, this is the digital debug LED. Okay, during the boot up before into Windows, right, you will do the postcode and such. But right after it's done all the verification and load into Windows, the debug LED will become a thermometer for your processor. It will show the temperature of your processor. So this is actually what you meant by setting this easy DG debug LED, right, to CPU core temperature. If you fancy to see some other temperature, you can only do one reading, right? Either you set it to your CPU temperature or your system temperature, which is your motherboard, your MOSFET, which is your VRM, or the chipset temperature. Okay, I'll just leave it to, it's more useful to show the processor temperature. Now over at this section, you have the on-off mode on certain functions. Things like the fans, case fans, or the radiator fans, or your air cooler fans that is plugged to a motherboard. You can set this notification as on. So if any of the fans fail, right, you will get a prompt straight instantly. So telling you that, hey, the fan is down, probably you have to check it. Then probably you have to power down to check your fans. Temperature unit right now is actually 43 degrees Celsius. It's in degrees Celsius. If I toggle this, right, this is not an instant change. Okay, you can see it's still degrees Celsius. But when you save it and boot back into UEFI, right, this will change to Fahrenheit instead of degrees Celsius. Now for FTP, I will just leave it on. Easy LED control. Now for the easy LED control, right, I will talk about it later. As for ERP ready, well, this is at all times. On my usage, it's always off. But some of you will prefer to set it on, based on the fact that if you allow your system to turn on 24/7, and you don't want it to take up so much power. So during idle time, right, if you have this on, it will lower down the power consumption. Okay, but the risk factor is there, as you know that when you shake your mouse or shake your keyboard, right, there might be a certain uplift on the power. Take for example, let's say it's on idle, right, it's running at 3 watt, and when you shake the mouse and things, right, when it's active, right, you went to 12 watt or so. For me, that is actually considered as a current spike, which is not healthy for your processor nor the rest of the component. So that's why I'm having it off. At all times, I want it to run it at consistent load. And also to the fact, if you are using remote control, which I'm using right now, my KVM, so I want to trigger the system to turn on. So I can't afford it to have this, on idle. I mean during sleep. Or should I say, when the system is off, right, if you trigger this on, right, there will be a disruption, okay, because the current is on the lowest, which I cannot afford. So that's the reason why I have this off instead of on. Okay, this section, well, it tells you the CPU, and you can click on the gear icon. It will show you the processor, the ratio that I've done, etc., or it's running, and with the rest of the specs. This is basically all the stats. And for DRAM, same as the CPU, when you click on here, right, it will tell you which are the DIMM slot that you have populated. See, the A2 and the B2, and you can check on the GDAC. This is standard. Okay, these are the information that probably, for overclockers, right, they will take note on. And what are the JDAC on the expo profile and such. Since right now I'm actually on XMP, right, it doesn't show the XMP. So, sorry, expo profile, it doesn't show the expo profile. Alright, next, storage. This is whereby you populate your M.2 on the M.2 slot, and the hard disk, like your 2.5 inch or your 3.5 inch hard disk, it will show over here. Now, speaking of which, right, if you populated some of the M.2, take for example, you have two One is on Windows, the other one is on Linux. You want Okay, right now default it will boot to Windows, which is my M.2 underscore 1. Okay, let's say I did populate another which is M.2 underscore 2. This is Linux. How do you want to boot to Linux instead of this? Come to the lower section where you have this lower priority. So right now this is actually my, you see, it will show you the ByWin X 572 terabyte. So if you want to load Linux by default, okay, take for example this, right, which is the second hard drive. Okay, another M.2. If this is Linux, right, you can just drag and pull to the front. So with this say, right, this will boot as a priority boot. Okay, if you want to back to Windows, right, you just pull this back. Right, it's quite simple. Now, pen profile, I mentioned to you earlier on, this is meant for you to set your fan curve and such, which I already covered. Last but not least, on the easy page, lower right hand corner where you can see this, the time date stamp, you can click on here and to set your date and your time. Now moving on to the advanced mode, let me start off with the favorites first. To save a favorite, take for example, let's say you are toggling the advanced mode. Let's say for example you wanted to do this. Okay, you want to set this as favorite. You can just press on the F2 key and select to the folder that you want to save. Take for example, I want to save to this. Just click, just enter. Then let's say I want to do this. Press F2 again. Which favorite you want? Let's say favorite 3, and I'll do this. Favorite 1, and do this. Just to show you the random. Alright. So basically, you can do this on all the different sections over here. Overclock, security, and such. You can do that. So let me just show you this. Press F2 to favorite. Let's say I want to save to favorite 2. So when you go to the favorites over here, right, see, you have favorite 1, favorite 2, favorite, oops. Okay, you have favorite 1, favorite 2, and favorite 3. See, all the subcategory. So back to the easy mode again, where I mentioned to you earlier on this, right? If let's say you have saved all the listing on your favorites, you can select. See, this is how it works. And to remove all this, right? Okay, take for example, going to the favorites. What you can do is to press F2. It will delete. Ask you whether you want to delete. Just click on OK. See, it will just delete off. So next time when you select to favorite 2, right, there won't be any more listing. Or same goes to favorite 1 and favorite 3. All the different folders. Okay, so this is how favorite works. Now back to the advanced mode. Starting off with the system status, it will show you the BIOS of your motherboard. Oops. Okay, the system date and such. So system date, as usual, you can just set the date. You can set the time. And all this listed below, right, are in fact the populated M.2 or the SATA drive, the hard disk, the 2.5 inch, the 3.5 inch hard disk. And over here, right, are all the BIOS version and such, which you can see. Now for DMI information, which is the in-depth information of your motherboard, where it shows you the serial number, the UUID and such. See, it will show you all here. So this is system info, or should I say system status. Coming to the advanced mode. Now you have all this. I'm just going to show you what they are. PCIe system settings, where you do the resizable bar, and you can do the lane generation. Let's say your M.2 first slot, right, is Gen 5, right, which I'm using. I'll set it to Gen 5. Now by setting all this over here, right, you're telling your system you can bypass the verification, just boot. I'm using this, and the system will just take in to your instruction and you will just boot. So sometimes it's good to declare the mode for your lanes, as in like your M.2, your PCIe and such. Now ACPI settings. Okay, these are your LED as mentioned. Set it to boot into Windows, right? Set the digital LED bug to read your CPU temperature. Then the CPU over temperature alert and such, you can set this up to you, enable, disable. and the power LED blinking and such. Integrated terahertz. Now this, as I mentioned to you that, you know, either you set it to auto, you disable it for the integrated and to run on your discrete graphic. Then you can enable your LAN port or disable it and such. Same goes to the Bluetooth, you know. And if you're running RAID, right, you can come over here and set on your SATA. Now for the audio, you have, I have this disabled because I'm not using the integrated audio on board. I have my own audio interface, that's why I set it to disable. By doing this, right, declaring all this, right, what to enable and disable, right, again, it will boot up your system in a quicker way. Alright, integrated graphic configuration. This is where you set the resizable bar and such, if I'm not wrong. Oh no. Okay, integrated graphic. Whether you want to set it on or off, this is where you set integrated graphic and such. Now when you set to PEG, right, the system will detect if you have a discrete graphic card, right, that would be your primary, and your integrated will be the secondary. Okay, things like that. Okay, I'm not going to go into that. USB configuration, I'll leave it as it is, but just to show you what it can be done. Power management setup. Okay, as mentioned to you, the ERP, if you want this to be enabled, you can enable. So if you're turning on your system 24/7 and during the other time, right, let's say you're not with the system, right, you want it to pull lesser power, you can set it to enable. This is actually good for countries that, you know, having very high, what they call it, the hydro bill or electrical bill. So if you want to run your system 24/7, you want to have it low power consumption, right, you can turn this enabled. But for me, right, I don't really like this function because, as I mentioned to you, right, idle, during the idle time, right, it will lower down the voltage, and when you shake your mouse and such, right, a sudden lift, or should I say spike, and that might harm the processor and the system. So at all times, if I want to use the system, I just turn it on. If I want to, go to sleep and such, right, I will not leave it on, I'll just turn it off. Okay, BIOS mode. Okay, UEFI or CSM, which is legacy. Wake up event, this is for your wake up on LAN, which I will use this, the PCIe device enabled. Okay, things like that. Click BIOS configuration. This is where you set every time when you boot into UEFI. Okay, what it means is that when you boot into UEFI, you will see the advanced page, the overclocking page and such. Okay, show application at first time. Oh, okay. Setting a profile, whether you want to see your profile, you want to see your favorites and such. By default, you can set all this. Secure erase. Now, this is meant for you if you have M.2 that is plugged to the system, and if you want to, erase the files or do a fast format and such, right? Not your OS drive. It will just protect your OS drive. If you want, no, sorry, it will not protect your OS drive. If you want to do a secure erase, you can do that on UEFI, but I advise you not to. I have done a mistake by using this function for some other motherboards, inclusive of this. I have a bad experience. Once I made use of the UEFI secure erase function, right, where it erased my data on the M.2, I'm not able to install Windows on it. Okay, based on some configuration and such. Okay, I'm not going to do this. So it will give you a warning. Alright, so do be careful on this. I would advise, if you want to erase your M.2, right, your NVMe, hard drive, SSD, make use of the application that comes with your M.2 and not this UEFI. It's a good function, but sometimes mishap can happen. Alright, MSI driver, I don't have to mention about this, which I mentioned on the easy. The Microsoft level 2, I'll leave it enabled. This is meant for Windows 11 to install to the drive that you need. Self-test on the NVMe, your M.2. You can just test it, see whether there are any, verification, any, etc. etc. You can do that. Okay, exit. Now, this is one of my favorite, which is the AMD overclocking. And what this does is manual configuration on the PVO2, the curve optimizer, the curve shaper, and such. So when you click on accept, right, the first thing when I do curve optimization and the curve shaper, or inclusive of the okay, it's called precision boost overdrive. The first thing I'll check is this SOC underscore uncall OC mode. I make sure this is actually enabled. This got to do with the communication between your RAMs and your processor, which is the Infinity Fabric. Having this enabled, right, you're telling the system that, you know, to have it at maximum performance. As you can see over here, see, to run at maximum specific frequency at all times. So this is actually what I mean by this. This is the first thing that I'll do. Next will be precision boost overdrive, where you can see over here, right, by right, this is actually on auto. So you can either enable it or having it advanced. For me, I won't let the system run by itself. I trust my own configuration. I have total control. That's why I set to advanced. And when it comes to PBO limits, right, there are some section over here: auto, disable, motherboard, and manual. Now, auto is meant for default AMD specs. Meaning, say it will grab the PPT, TDC, and EDC based on the processor itself. Okay, from AMD. Disable, that means say I don't want to use at all. For motherboard, you're letting the motherboard decide what are the PPT, TDC, and the TDC. This is very dangerous for me. Okay, some of you might have used this. I will not use this based on the fact that prolonged period of time, right, there might be hiccups, and there are some incident, some mishap, that some of them using this function and not able to boot up to, or should I say, make use of the processor. Anyway, I will not use this. I'll set to manual. Having this, right, these are the settings for my 9950X. Alright, so I have all this manually configured. And I know when you see the PPT, when you search on the internet, right, you tell you 230 watts for the 9950X and such. Now over here, you might say, wow, Cleo, you have set over. Nope. Based on the fact this is milliwatt, it's not watt. So for 230 watt, okay, which is this, since this is milliwatt, I have to add 3 more zeros. Alright. So these are the things that I will set. These are the default AMD things. Why I said, okay, probably you might say that, hey, Cleo, you can just simply set to auto. True enough, but I just want total control. Right? So that's the reason why I've set over here. Though I know that these figures, the figures on the PPT, TDC, and EDC, right, is the same as the auto. As mentioned, I just want total control. Once it's done, right, you can set, you can set your scaler, you can set your boost clock. Often people like to put manual and set it to, X10 and such. Now, for those of you who do overclocking, you love to do this, but for me, no. This is you're killing your processor. You can set it to 1 or 2, it's alright. Okay, not so aggressive. But for me, right, I don't even want to touch it. I'll just leave it auto. Okay, the system is safe enough for MSI board and other brand boards, which I'm not going to mention over here. The standard of the scaler itself, right, they either pull 1 or 2, that's it. Okay, so it's not so aggressive. Now, CPU boost clock override. You guys just want to have the plus 200 megahertz, which I seriously do not understand why. Because the plus 200 megahertz, right, as some of you have witnessed the other content on the PVO limits that I've set, I've shown you just at 200 megahertz how much power you're drawing. Is it, is it worth it to draw so much power and to increase the temperature just to add the 200 megahertz? Maybe to some of you it's actually okay, but for me, no. So I just have it disable. GFX, okay, platform thermal throttle. You can set a limit. You can set a manual. Then, even though you have set all these settings over here, right, inclusive of the curve optimizer, curve shaper, right, you can set the temperature not to go 85 degrees Celsius or such, or maybe 75 degrees Celsius. This is manual configuration. And when you do this, right, once it reaches 75 degrees Celsius, right, you will just cool down, as in, like, you will not push any further, you will just hold back. Okay, until that the processor is lower by 75 degrees Celsius, right, then you will push. Alright. GFX curve optimizer, most of the time I will not touch. This is meant for the integrated graphic that you want to do curve optimizer, which I don't think it's necessary. You can do that on Afterburner for NVIDIA cards. And for AMD, right, you have to use the Radeon utility. Curve optimizer, this is my standard. I will always set for 9950X and 9950X 3D. There are dual CCD, so I will make use of per CCD, which is always the value -15, -10 as a standard. If you're using 9800X 3D, right, which does not have a dual CCD, right, I will do this as all core, because that is only 8 core. I think it's 8 core 16 thread, is it? Oh, correct, 8 core 16 thread. So I will do all core -20. Okay, -20, -15. That is for 9800X 3D. All right. Anything above 9950X or 9950X 3D, I will just do per core. Alright, curve shaper. Okay, this is pretty daunting. If you guys want to find out how to do the curve shaper, probably you can actually do a search on YouTube and it will show you how to figure with this. And these are all my standards that I'll normally do. With some of you have followed me, you will know that I normally will have this kind of configuration. It's safe to use, in fact. Okay, so this is actually the precision boost overdrive. Now if you want more advanced, you can manually overclock your CPU. Just to show you, see, all this you can do. I wouldn't have a clue what these are, as I don't really touch them, but for overclockers, just to show you what it has, the DDR Infinity Fabric and such, right, just to show you, Nitro and such, which I have no idea what this is. Infinity Fabric sequence, right? Then VDDG voltage controller, so we can set this if you want to. Next will be this. Oh, this is VDDP, this is G. I believe it's the same. Okay. Then this, as mentioned to you, I will set this to enable, then followed by the SOC voltage, etc. LN2 mode. These are extreme overclockers that use nitrogen, solution for the cooling. So we can do this. BDD miscellaneous. Then the L clock frequency control. Onboard voltage control. You have the BDD IO and the BPP. And at all times I will not touch this. Right. Then you have the eco mode. You can enable this if you want to. Alright, so this is actually the precision boost overdrive, which is under the AMD overclocking. This is done. Next section, which is overclocking. Now, overclocking, it's slightly different from the advanced AMD overclocking. This is meant for precision boost overdrive. And for this overclocking, right, this is meant for you to do manual tweaks on your processor and your RAMs. So at all times, I'll just leave it expert. This you can set the ratio as in having 43, 47 or 50 and such. Take a look over here. So by default it's 4.3 gigahertz. If I were to set ratio of 57, okay, that means that you want it to at all times run at 5.7 gig base clock, which is not healthy. I'll leave it auto. Then the X3D mode, as I mentioned to you, this is for you to toggle the X3D processor, be the 9800X3D or the 9950X3D. Okay, for me, I'll just disable. Advanced CPU configuration. Okay, you can set. Now, this is another section where you do the precision boost overdrive, but I wouldn't use this. Right, this is the one. I wouldn't use this at all, though it has an advance. Now this, okay, I'll just skip. Just know that this, under this section, right, overclocking, right, it has also the precision boost overdrive, but don't use the overclocking. Instead, use the advance. Alright, back to here. Then these are the things that you can set under the advanced CPU configuration. AMD CBS. Alright, these are the function. Okay, Now, e-clock mode, I wouldn't have a clue what this is. Then you have this optimization, optimized performance profile. This, if you have the selective RAMs like the SK Hynix and such, right, you can select this. This will speed up the boot time. As mentioned, okay, as declared on the specification, but when I try this, right, it doesn't seem, to be any faster when I set to auto, so I just leave it. Now, for your RAMs, if your RAMs have XMP profile, you can enable it. Okay, or if you have Expo profile, you can enable it. Take for example, let's say your RAMs don't have Expo profile but got XMP profile, you can set this. But at all times, I would advise for AMD system, right, make use of the Expo RAMs, which I'm using right now. My RAMs are dual profile, which has XMP and Expo. If you have such choices, for AMD as mentioned, right, use the Expo profile. Then when you come to this section, right, where you have the DRAM speed and such, I know that I'm running on 6000 mega transfer, so I'll manually set this. By right, this is actually on auto, alright, which is this. But I didn't set to auto based on the fact that I do not require the system to verify that it's actually a mega transfer 6000 RAMs. Instead, I'm just telling the system, hey, look, I'm using 6000. Don't bother to verify, just boot. Okay, so this will speed up, inclusive of the F clock frequency. All right, I set it to 2000, and I know that with these settings, right, on a 6000 mega transfer RAMs, right, I will set this U clock DIV mode to 1:1 ratio. Okay, meaning to say when it do the process, right, it's like between the processor and the RAMs, right, it will be faster. Also, some right having the mega transfer of 6800, 7000, 8000, etc., it will be on this 1:2, which is much slower. So a sweet spot for AMD, right, will be on 6000 mega transfer, right? The rest, all this, I wouldn't have the clue, just to show you. Latency killer, a lot people ask me about this. Now, my experience not really that great with the latency killer. Alright, it's actually forcing the RAMs, and it happened that I have a RAM that is not SK Hynix. I have killed the RAMs. So do be careful. If you have quality RAMs, right, you can make use of this. Okay, but at all times I advise not to, just leave it. Now, high efficiency mode, you can set this enable. Then you can set the preset to tighter, balance, relax, and such. Now, for a short period of time, okay, you can use this under tighter. As I mentioned on my past videos, right, on MSI, it's great that you can use tighters, but I noticed that having tighters, right, the power consumption is pretty high on the RAMs itself, as in like the SoC voltage. So tighter will be much looser, but it doesn't, salt the performance. So you can use this. But having to say this, right, I have done my own settings, so I will just set it auto. Next, you have this memory try, which I mentioned to you. You're set to Expo profile, and you want to push further, you can select the profile over here. Okay, not going to repeat what this is, as I mentioned this before. Memory context restore, you can enable or disable. Okay, I leave it auto based on the fact that every 30 days, right, for the memory training timing, it will expire. So it's good to have it auto, where it, have a fresh start to recalibrate and such. Now, a lot of you will say that I have it very fine, not to worry, I'll just disable it. Okay, every time is always the same. But don't forget, as time goes by, right, your RAMs will degrade, and if you don't let the system verify it, okay, you might hit into a problem whereby it can't boot, or maybe giving you a black screen, or having error codes like C5, as in like the debug code C5, or even AB. Right, take note on this. Advanced DRAM configuration, this is where you do all the manual settings. Okay, this is how it looks like. Okay, these are for advanced users who want to overclock their RAMs and such. Now, voltage setting, digit all power. This is where you set the load line calibration for both the CPU and your RAMs. The first one, this is meant for your CPU, and this is for your RAMs. Okay, so you can see the lines over here, right? Oops, the lines over here. This will tell you what are the mode. So you just set accordingly. Now, if your system is running fine and you just want to push, right, you can change the load line calibration, but I would advise not to. Leave it as it is. For some boards, yes, I will toggle the load line calibration if the system is drawing too aggressively on the current and such. But for MSI, it's pretty safe. I can just leave it auto. Next will be the CPU core voltage. Now, something about this, for processor, high-end processor, right, normally I'll just leave it auto. I will not touch, as it need the current to sustain the clock speed of the processor. But things like 9800X 3D or 9700X or maybe lower, inclusive of the 7700X or 7800X 3D and such, I will do the offset. Offset. And I'll set to negative. Oops. So sorry. Okay, over here. I'll set this to negative and with the offset of 0.05. Now, the system itself, most of the system by default, it will have a what they call voltage core, V core, at 1.35. By setting this as 0.05, right, this will drop 1.30. But on the actual run, right, it will pull accordingly to what it needs. So later, I mean, when you see the benchmark that I've done earlier, right, it's not pulling 1.3 at all or 1.2. It's lower. So this is actually good. So having to lock a certain V core voltage, right, that will prolong the life of your system. But do take note, if you are using a high-end processor, right, try not to use this, because your high-end processor, right, the 16 core 32 thread kind of processor, it does require that voltage. So take note on this. Then next thing I'll set is the RAMs, which is the PMIC and the IMC, communication between the RAMs and the processor itself. The voltage, right, by default it will run 1.2. Okay, and when it runs in benchmark, if you set this to auto, okay, let's say you set this to auto, it will go 1.2 and above, which is not healthy to the RAMs. And I know that this set of RAMs that I'm using is able to run at 1.15 volt. So bringing it down, right, I override. Okay, without suffering from any performance loss and such. Now, by setting of this, right, as you have witnessed earlier on my benchmark, it's 1.158 around there. It doesn't go any further. So by locking this, right, you are prolonging the life of your RAMs. Okay, so this is actually good. It runs cooler. Your temperature will not be so high. Now VDD, okay, this one, as earlier on I shown you before on the advanced mode with the precision boost overdrive. You can set this also, up to you. See, same goes to this. See, you can set, and all the rest, which is bottom, I will not touch. Right, some of you might want to set, oh, the BDDG voltage I set at 1.3, 1.2, etc, etc. No, I don't have to, because MSI have actually done everything. It will be 1.1, and if it needs, right, you will pull slightly higher, which is safe to use. So this is all that's been set. Then these are the rest of the section. I don't have to go into it now. CPU specification, when you click on this, right, it will tell you, as mentioned to you, the system specs that you've used, like the processor, etc and etc. It will show you all this. This is just a description info on your processor. Alright, oops, done with the overclocking. Next will be security. Now for security, this is whereby if let's say you have siblings playing together, I mean you have your sibling sharing with your system, you have done settings on the UEFI, you wouldn't want your sibling to touch the UEFI. You can set an admin password. Okay, so this is actually what I meant, so that they will not touch. Now coming to the U key. Now this U key, right? To be honest with you, it will generate a token to, it will generate the password to your thumb drive, and in the event if you want to boot, right, you make use of that. This is more on enterprise level. I will not suggest you to enable this. Okay, it's pretty troublesome. Trust computing, it will just show you all the security. Leave it as it is, don't touch unless you're doing enterprise level and you have the TPM module hardware. Chassis intrusion, well, for OEM PCs, right, like HP, like Dell, Lenovo, they have this intrusion pin plug to the motherboard. So if anybody were to open up the case cover, right, the intrusion will prompt. So this is actually what I meant. Normally we will not use. Secure boot. Now this is whereby it's important for gamers like those who play Valorant and you need to have the secure boot, right? You will need to set this secure boot mode to custom. Okay, if you don't set to custom, right, you will not be able to play Valorant. But make sure that in the event, let's say you have this as custom playing Valorant and such, right, and you want to reformat your hard drive, to do a fresh copy of Windows and such, make sure you come back here and set it back to standard. Okay. Alright, next will be boot. These are the boot sequence as I mentioned to you. Okay, this functions you can set over here, up to you. Now coming to the boot order, which I mentioned to you, is just like pulling this drag and drop. See, take a look over here. Right now I'm just going to drag this to the third place. Take for example, see, it went to the third. So this is actually the boot sequence, nothing much. And last but not least, save and exit. I don't have to mention this, these are self-explained.